All right, guys, so this is the review for quiz 4. So I think the best way to use this is to do it by yourself, and if there's a problem that you're struggling with, then watch me do it. But if you just do it alongside of me at the same time, I feel like you need to do some of this on your own. So anyway, okay, so here is question 1. Okay, so this is a system of equations, and I cannot use elimination on this. The reason I can't use elimination is because the x is squared in the first equation and not in the second, and same thing on the y's. Okay, so I have to use substitution. I definitely do not want to solve equation 1 for x or y because they're squared and I would have to square root to solve it. So I'm going to solve equation 2 for either x or y. So solving equation 2 for x, I get x equals 7 minus y. Then I'm going to go back up here into equation 1, and right here where I see an x, I'm going to put in 7 minus y. Okay, so I'm going to go in parentheses, 7 minus y squared minus y squared equals 21. Now, 7 minus y squared is 7 minus y times 7 minus y. So you can't, a lot of people will go 7 squared is 49, negative y squared is a positive y squared, done. That is not true because you have to FOIL that. So that's 49, negative 7y is negative 14y, plus y squared minus y squared equals 21. So those y squareds cancel. So I can see that instead of putting everything on one side to factor, I'm actually going to pull the 49 to the other side because that y is not squared. So then I have a negative 14y equals, and then I have 21 minus 49 is negative 28 divided by 14, and I get y equals 1/2. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and put in a half. And then if you use substitution, finding the next answer is super easy. You get x equals 7 minus 1/2. Well, 7 minus 1/2 is just 6 1/2, and that's your answer. Okay, now you could do 6.5. Sorry, I'm trying to highlight and it's not working. You could do 6.5 and 0.5, but there are problems that I've seen on the final where they say don't write your answers as decimals, keep them as fractions. So, you know, if you can and you're able to, I would just leave it like that. This problem is checkable because you can store 6.5 or 6 1/2 in your calculator for x, 1/2 in for y, put it here, get a 21, put here, get a 7, and you know you got it right. Okay, here's question 2. Question 2, you also cannot solve this by substitution. This guy has just an x, this has an x and a y, this has just a y, that has an x and a y. So I cannot use elimination. I definitely don't want to deal with equation 2 because that's going to be involving fractions if I solve for x or y. So I'm going to take equation 1 and I'm going to solve it for x or y, it doesn't matter. So I have x equals 7 minus y. Now I go into equation 2, and right there where I see an x, I'm going to put in 7 minus y. So it's 7 minus y times y equals 10. It's a little awkward to have the y at the end. Really, it should be at the beginning. It doesn't matter. It just means distribute. So it's 7y minus y squared equals 10. The y squared is a negative. I know I'm going to have to factor, so I'm going to pull it that way. So I have y squared minus 7y plus 10 equals 0. And then I factor to y and y. 10 is 5 and 2. Signs are the same. They're both negative. And I get y equals 2 and y equals 5. So I'm going to come right here, and I'm going to come right there. And now remember substitution, finding the second equation or second value is super easy. You just go to the equation that's already solved. So if y was 5, you'd have 7 minus 5, which is 2. If y was 2, you'd have 7 minus 2, which is 5, and you can totally check those, okay? Store in the values, plug it here, make sure it works, okay? Okay, question number 3. Remember when it says row operations / Gauss elimination, you can use Gaussian or you can use Gauss-Jordan. So Gaussian is the one where you just have the zeros in the corner. Gauss-Jordan is where you have to go all the way to the identity. So Gaussian is much easier, and so I'm going to do that one, okay? So the way you set this up is you have your A on the left, and then on the right goes your B, which is those values on the other side, okay? So first thing I need to get is a 0 right here. I'm going to use that 1 right there. So I'm going to go -3 times row 1, added to row 2, becomes my new row 2. So row 1 doesn't change. Row 3 doesn't change. Distributed -3 across the top, I get solid -3s. Put row 2 underneath it, add those together, and I get 0, -4, -4, and 8. The next thing I need is a 0 here. I can do row 1 minus row 2 or row 2 minus row 1, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go 1 and 3. I'm going to go row 1 minus row 3 becomes my new row 3. So I could do row 1 minus row 3 or row 3 minus row 1. Okay, I said that wrong. So row 1 doesn't change. Row 2 doesn't change. Row 1 minus row 3, 1 minus 0, 0, or pardon me, 1 minus 1, 0, 1 minus 3, -2, 1 minus 0, 1, 1 minus 0, 1. The last thing I need to get is a 0 right here. In that position, I cannot use row 1 because this 1 will mess up this 0. But I'm lucky because I can turn a 2 into a 4 easily and then just add those together. So I'm going to go -2 times row 3. That turns that into a +4. Added to row 2 becomes my new row 3. So row 1 doesn't change. Row 2 doesn't change. Take a -2 across the bottom and you get 0, 4, -2, -2. Put row 2 underneath it. Add those together and I get 0, 0, -6, and 6. And I can stop. Okay. If I wanted to keep going and turn that into the identity, I could. My answer would then be on the right-hand side, all this stuff here. I think it's easier to just use this method. So remember, you start at the bottom. This means no x, no y, -6z equals 6. So that means z is a -1. Remember, you have to write these as an ordered triple. Once I have that value, I go up to the one up above. That means -4y minus 4z equals 8. Z is a -1. So it's a -4y plus 4 equals 8. Pull your 4 over. -4y equals 4. Divide. Y is a -1. Then go to the top. X plus y plus z equals 1. That's x minus 1 minus 1 equals 1. That's x minus 2 equals 1. Pull the 2 over. X equals 3, and you got it. Okay? Totally checkable. Store in those values for x and y and z. You'll have to do a and b and c. And then you go into the original equation, put in the left, get a 1, etc., etc. So I've only done 3 problems, you guys, and every single one of those 3 problems is checkable. So make sure you do it. Okay? Okay, question 4 is easy and quick. Remember, when you do the determinant, you multiply those together first. So 6 times -2 is a -12. Then you put your minus. Then you multiply that way. A -4 times a -2 is a +8. A -12 and a -8 is a -20. And you're done. The biggest mistake that people make is they make that 8 a positive. But the formula is subtract. Okay? Okay, question number 5. Okay, so this one's going to be super long because it's a 3 by 3 and I'm using Cramer's rule. So this one's going to be long. Okay, so set up my D, which is right here. Okay, I leave the left-hand side exactly the way it is. Then I write down my 1. Then remember, I get rid of the row, get rid of the column. What I'm left with is 4, negative 2, 3, 1. Okay, then I move to the next number, which is 1, but I change the sign. And then I get rid of that row, and I get rid of that column. And what I'm left with is 2, negative 1, 3, 1. Okay, and then I move to the third number, which is a 2. I do not change the sign. Get rid of the row, get rid of the column, 2, negative 1, 4, negative 2. Now I do the cross multiply thing. So, go away, I'm recording.
Hi everyone.
That's my friend, Miss Leedy. 4 times 1 is 4, minus, I'm teaching to an empty classroom, so she walked in to say hi. 3 times negative 2 is a negative 6, minus a negative 6 is a plus 6, minus 1 parenthesis, 2 times 1 is 2, minus 3 times negative 1, minus, that's a negative 3, minus a negative 3 is a plus 3, then you have a plus 2, 2 times negative 2 is negative 4, minus 4 times negative 1 is a negative 4, minus a negative 4 is a plus 4. At that point right there, I would just put it in my calculator, okay? So you're going to go 1 parenthesis, 4 plus 6, close it, minus 1 parenthesis, 2 plus 3, close it, plus 2 parenthesis, negative 4 plus 4, close it, and I get D is 5, okay? Now I'm going to do that 3 more times. You guys, there's only so much I can ask you on a quiz because there's only so much time. So I know this is long, and I'm sorry about that, but just know that you're going to have enough time. Okay, to find the D sub x's, you change the x's. So the coefficients on the y stay the same. The coefficients on the z stay the same. The x's change to the right-hand side, 4, negative 6, 3. So you take your first number, which is a 4, get rid of the row, get rid of the column, 4, negative 2, 3, 1. The next number is a negative 6, change the sign, get rid of the row, get rid of the column, 2, negative 1, 3, 1. The third number is a 3, write that down, don't change the sign, get rid of the row, get rid of the column, 2, negative 1, 4, negative 2. Now I'm going to cross multiply, so 4 times 1 is 4, minus 2 times negative 3, or negative 2 times 3 is a negative 6, minus a negative 6 is a plus 6. Then you go plus 6 parenthesis, 2 times 1 is 2, minus 3 times negative 1 is a negative 3, minus a negative 3 is a plus 3, plus 3 parenthesis, 2 times negative 2 is a negative 4, minus 4 times negative 1 is a negative 4, minus a negative 4 is a plus 4. Okay, then you put that in your calculator exactly the way you see it. And when you do, you get 70. Okay, now I got 5 for my D, and I got 70 for my D sub x, and 70 goes into 5. So, or 5 goes into 70. So I'm feeling pretty good, like I'm in good shape. Okay, so let's do D sub y. So the x's don't change. The y's change to negative 4, negative 6, 3. The z's change to negative 1, negative 2, and 1. Write down the 1. Get rid of the row. Get rid of the column. Negative 6, negative 2, 3, 1. The next number is a 1. Change the sign. Get rid of the row. Get rid of the column. 4, negative 1, 3, 1. The next number is a 2. Don't change the sign. Get rid of the row. Get rid of the column. Negative 4, negative 1, negative 6, negative 2. Do the cross multiply thing. Negative 6 times 1 is a negative 6, minus 3 times negative 2 is a negative 6, minus a negative 6 is a plus 6, minus 1 parenthesis. Negative 4 times 1 is a negative 4, minus 3 times negative 1 is a negative 3, minus a negative 3 is a plus 3, plus 2 parenthesis. Negative 4 times negative 2 is a positive 8, minus negative 6 times negative 1 is a positive 6. Put this in your calculator, and you get Okay, now I'm going to find my d sub z. So x's don't change, y's don't change, z's change to -4, -6, +3. Write down the first number, get rid of the row, get rid of the column, 4, -6, 3, 3. Second number is a 1, get rid of the row, get rid of the column, 2, -4, 3, 3. Third number is a 2, get rid of the row, get rid of the column, 2, -4, 4, -6. Write down the 1, 4 times 3 is 12, minus 3 times -6 is a -18, minus a -18 is a +18, minus 1, 3 times 2 is 6, minus 3 times -4 is a -12, minus a -12 is a +12, plus 2, 2 times -6 is a -12, minus 4 times -4 is a -16, minus a -16 is a +16. Put this in your calculator. And you get 20, okay? And I'm feeling good because all these numbers, 20 or 5 goes into all these numbers. So to find x, you take your d sub x, which we found to be 70, and you divide it by d, which is 5, and 70 divided by 5 is 14. And then to find the x, you take, the y, the d sub y is 5 divided by d, which is 5, and you get a 1. To find the z, d sub z, which is 20, divided by d, which is 5, and you get a 4. So it's 14, 1, 4, store it in, check your answer. That is also checkable. So everything we've done so far is checkable, okay? All right, question number 6. So on question number 6a, A and B are the same size, so I can go ahead and do this, okay? So I'm going to take matrix A, and I'm going to write it down. And then I'm going to go -3, and then I'm going to put matrix B. So the biggest mistake that people make on these, you guys, is they start multiplying the matrices. But you can see because there's a sign separating them that I'm actually adding them, or combining them is a better way to say it. So the first matrix doesn't change. Go to the second matrix and distribute a -3. I'm going to replace the -3 with a positive because I'm adding. So multiply all those numbers by -3 and you get -12, -12, 0, -9, -6, -3, -3, 6, and 0. Then it's very simple. You just combine the numbers. So 5 and -7, -12 is a -7. I'm not changing any signs, I'm just combining. 4 and -7 is a -8. 4 and 0 is a 4. -4, -9 is a -13. -4, -6 is a -10. 0, -3 is a -3. 1 and -3 is a -2. 6 plus 2 is 8. 0, 0 gives me 0. There's my answer. Okay, that's it. Okay, question B. Still involving A and B, so I can still do it. This one right here, something very similar to this did show up on the final, just so you know, last semester. So take a 3, I kind of wrote that 3 kind of small. Take a 3 and distribute it across matrix A. So I would really like you to write this down first as your first step, okay? And then go +2, and then put your matrix B. Okay, so I can tell these are being added or combined. First guy, distribute a 3, and I have 15, 12, 12, -12, -12, 0, 3, 6, and 0. Next guy, distribute a 2, 8, 8, 0, 6, 4, 2, 2, -4, 0. Then I just add them together. So 15 plus 8 is 23. 12 and 8 gives me 20. 12 and 0 is a 12. -12 and a 6 is a -6. -12, -4 is a -8. 0 and 2 is 0. 3 and 2 is 5. 6 minus 4 is a 2. 0 and 0 is a 0. There's my answer. Okay? Question C. You're multiplying matrix B by matrix C. Well, B is a 3 by 3, and C is a 3 by 2, and so I can totally do it. Okay, sorry, my pen is not working. Okay, so C is a 3 by 2, so I can totally do it, and my answer is going to be a 3 by 2. Okay, the order matters, so the first thing you're going to do is put matrix B, and then right next to it, you're going to put matrix C. I'm going to come down here, and I know my answer is going to be 3 numbers down and 2 numbers across. Okay, so this guy over here is always rows. This guy over here is always columns. Okay, so the 0 right here that's highlighted in pink comes down. So you go 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 4 is 16, 0 times 0 is a 0, 16 plus 0 is a 20. It goes in that top left corner. Okay, now, when I did my little size of what it was going to be, I accidentally put 3 marks up here. It was supposed to just be 2. Okay, so then I change columns. Okay, and the pink 0 comes down. So 4 times negative 2 is a negative 8. 4 times 3 is 12. 0 times negative 1 is a 0. A negative 8 and a positive 12 is a 4. So some of you are not knowing where to put that number, that 4. Do you see how I'm using row 1? The answers from row 1 go in row 1. So that would be a 4 right there. Okay? Okay, now I'm changing rows right here. So I go purple to yellow. Okay? And the 1 comes down. So 3 times 1 is 3. 2 times 4 is 8. 1 times 0 is a 0. 3 plus 8 is 11. Purple to green, the purple 1 comes down. 3 times negative 2 is a negative 6. 3 times 2 is 6. 1 times negative 1 is a negative 1. Combine, and that goes in the row that I'm using, which is row 2. And now I move to the last one, which is here. So the 0 that's circled in red comes down. So 1 times 1 is 1. 4 times negative 2 is a negative 8. 0 times 0 is a 0. 1 minus 8 is negative 7. Now I go red to green. 1 times negative 2 is a negative 2. Negative 2 times 3 is a negative 6. 0 times negative 1 is a 0. Negative 2 minus 6 is a negative 8. There's my answer. Okay? Question D. Question D is matrix C, which is a 3 by 2, multiplied by matrix A, which is a 3 by 3. The middle numbers don't match, so this answer is not possible, is what you would highlight. Okay? All right, number 7. Solve using matrix algebra. Okay? Here's the formula for matrix algebra that you have to have memorized. Okay? So you go A on the left, identity on the right, manipulate it so that you have the identity on the left and the inverse is on the right. And then once you have that inverse, then what you do next is you take the inverse and you multiply it by B, and that's your answer. X represents your answer. Okay? So matrix A is right here. 2, negative 6, 1, negative 2. The right side is the identity. And now I need to turn the left side into the identity. So guys, the first thing I'm supposed to do is to get a 1 right there. So to get a 1, I could divide by 2, but dividing by 2 is going to make a fraction because of that right there. So I have 2 options. I can postpone making it a 1, or I can just flip-flop my rows. I'm going to flip-flop my rows. So row 1 becomes row 2, and row 2 becomes row 1. Okay, so switch those out, and now we've got our first number, what it's supposed to be. Okay, the next thing I need is a 0 here. Remember to use the 1. So I'm going to go negative 2 times row 1 plus row 2 becomes my new row 2. So row 1 doesn't change. Multiply row 1 by a negative 2 and I get negative 2, 4, 0, negative 2. Write row 2 down. Add those together and I get 0, negative 2, 1, negative 2. Now, this negative 2 right here, I'm supposed to turn into a 0 into a 1, but if I divide by a -2 right now, I'm going to get a fraction, so I'm going to postpone it. Sometimes if you postpone things, it's okay. So now I'm going to make that a 0. Well, I can turn one of those into a negative and then just add those together. I don't want to turn row 1 into a negative because then that's a negative. So I'm going to go, basically, I'm going to go a negative multiplied by row 2 plus row 1 becomes my new row 1. That's the same thing as row 1 minus row 2. I just think it's easier to think of like that. So anyway, row 2 doesn't change. Change the signs of row 2 and you get 0, 2, negative 2, 2. And then write row 1 underneath it. And then add those together and you get 1, 0, negative 2, positive 3. Now I have to turn that negative 2 into a 1, but it's my last step, so it's okay. So I'm going to go row 2 divided by negative 2 becomes my new row 2. Okay, so row 1 doesn't change. Divide by negative 2 and you get 0, 1, negative 1/2, and 1. So now I'm going to say, I'm going to take my inverse and multiply it by b. So my inverse is negative 2, 3, negative 1/2, 1. I'm going to multiply it by b, which is the right-hand side, 0, 2. So this is a 2 by 2 multiplied by a 2 by 1. Totally works. And the answer is a 2 by 1. Don't let the 1/2 freak you out. We're going to be fine. Trying to highlight. So I'm going to take this row right there and this column right there. Remember the 3 that's in pink comes down. So negative 2 times 0 is a 0. 3 times 2 is 6. 0 and 6 gives me 6. And then I move to this guy. The green 1 comes down. So negative 1/2 times 0 is a 0. 1 times 2 is 2. 0 plus 2 is a 2. I'm done. My answer is 6, 2. Plug it back in and check it. Okay? Question 8. Partial fraction decomposition. Okay? I do think this will be on the final. So x minus 3. This is x plus 2 times x plus 1 squared. Okay? So this x plus 2, you need one of them. Since the x plus 1 is squared, you need one of them. And then you need two of them. That has to be your setup. Okay? Above this is an A. Above that's a B. Above that's a C. I'm going to come down here to where I'm going to write my answer. And I'm going to set myself up. So once I find A, B, and C, I can just stick them right there where they're supposed to go. Some people don't write their answer in the right form. The form that it's supposed to be in is what I'm writing right now. It's not A equals this, B equals that, C equals that. It's the right-hand side. Okay? All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply all those terms by x plus 2 times x plus 1 squared. Some people don't like to write this down. They feel like they can do it in their head. And sometimes when people do it in their head, they mess up. So I wouldn't recommend it. That little, multiplying thing. So this x plus 2 cancels with that one. X plus 1 squared cancels with that one. And you have x minus 3. You guys, the original numerator, the original top, is always what you're going to be left with on the left-hand side. Okay, next one. This x plus 2 cancels with that x plus 2. Now look what we've got. People are getting confused on that. You've got a times x plus 1. Do not distribute the a until you multiply x plus 1 times x plus 1. When you multiply x plus 1 times x plus 1, you have to FOIL it. That gives you x to the second plus 2x plus 1. Then as the next step, you would distribute the a. Please don't distribute it before. It's too difficult. It's not good. So this x plus 1 cancels with one of those x plus 1s. And now we've got the same scenario. We've got a b multiplied by two things that must be FOILed, which is x to the second plus 3x plus 2. Then we do the last one. X plus 1 squared cancels with x plus 1 squared. Distribute, and you get cx plus 2c. Please don't start splitting this apart yet, because I need to distribute that a and b. So I have x minus 3 equals ax to the second plus 2ax plus a plus bx squared plus 3bx plus 2b plus cx plus 2c. Okay? What has a squared in it? This has a squared in it, and this has a squared in it. Write it down without the squareds, so that'd be a plus b. There is no squared on the other side, so I put a 0. Okay? In terms of the x to the first, we've got that one, that one, that one, and that one. Write it down without the x's. That x sitting alone is a 1x, so that's 1 equals 2a plus 3b plus c. Anything that doesn't have any x's in it would be negative 3 equals a plus 2b plus 2c. Okay, now I have to find a, b, and c. This guy right here, equation 1, already doesn't have a c. So I'm going to say eliminate the c's, and I just write down that equation. Now what I have to do is I have to eliminate the c's again. So I'm going to take equation 2 and distribute a negative 2. When I do that, I get negative 2 equals negative 4a minus 6b minus 2c. Write down equation 3 exactly the way it was, and now my c's go away again. So I have negative 5 equals negative 3a minus 4b. Now look at those two equations. I have to get rid of something else. I can do a's or b's. They're both going to be pretty easy. I'm going to distribute a 3. When I do that, I get 0 equals 3a plus 3b, and now my a's go away. So I have negative 5 equals negative b, so now I know b is negative 5. So I'm going to come right there and I'm going to put a negative 5. Now what I do is I go to the center. So I go here or here. I could also go here and put a negative 5 in for b. Obviously that's the easiest one. So 0 equals a minus 5. Move my 5 over. A equals 5. There's that. Now I need to find c. I'm going to go up to the top. I'm going to choose the one that I think is the easiest. To me it looks like that. So I have 1 equals 2 times a, that's 2 times 5 is 10. 3 times b, that's 3 times negative 5, which is a negative 15, plus c. So that's c minus 5 equals 1. Pull it over. C equals 6. There's your answer. You guys, this is checkable. So to check this, you would take your original problem right here. You would have to add parentheses when you put it in, okay? And then you would take this guy, adding parentheses around those two, store a value of x in, and make sure that the original and your answer are the same. When you store these in, you cannot use a negative 1 or a negative 2 because those are restrictions, okay? All right. Question 9 is another Gauss elimination. So I'm going to do Gaussian, so I'm only going to get the zeros, okay? So I'm going to go 2, 2, 0, solid line 6, underneath 1, 1, 1, 1, underneath 3, 4, negative 1, and 13, okay? So first thing I need is a 0 right there, okay? Now, I don't want to ruin that 1. If I get rid of the 1 and I'm left with a 2 here and with a 3 there, and then I'm going to try to turn the 3 into a 0 using a 2 and a 3, that would involve both of those becoming 6s. I just feel like it's kind of going to be a mess. So I'm going to switch rows. So I'm going to say row 1 becomes row 2, and row 2 becomes row 1. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to have that 1 right there to help me get the zeros underneath that I need. So you don't have to do that. I think it's pretty wise though, okay? All right, so now the first thing I need is a 0 here. Use the 1. So go negative 2 times row 1 plus row 2 becomes my new row 2. So row 1 doesn't change. Row 3 doesn't change. Multiply the top by negative 2, you get solid negative 2's. Write row 2 underneath it, and you get 0, 0, negative 2, and 4. Well, now I notice I've got 2 zeros, and I'm supposed to have 2 zeros in the bottom. So I'm going to go out of order, and I'm going to switch them. So I'm going to say row 2 becomes row 3, and row 3 becomes row 2. So row 1 doesn't change. Switch row 2 and row 3. And now I only have one more thing that I need to get. And that would be a 0 here. Use the 1. So go -3 times row 1 plus row 2 becomes my new row 2. So row 1 doesn't change. Row 3 doesn't change. Multiply the top by a negative, -3, -3, -3, -3. Write row 2 underneath it. Add those together and you get 0, 1, -4, and 10. And that's all I need, okay? You guys, there was one time where they asked you to solve using row echelon on a final. So I almost have this in row echelon. Row echelon means get those to be zeros and those to be ones. So if I was asked to do row echelon, which we're not going to do, but if I was, then the last thing I would do to that matrix is divide row 3 by a -2. That would turn that into a 1, and then I have row echelon, okay? But you can't use row echelon on this one, guys. It has to be Gaussian or Gauss-Jordan, okay? So I'm done. Then I go down here to this bottom right here, and that means no x, no y, minus 2z equals 4, divide z equals -2. Come over here and write that down. Then I go to the row up above it, and I get y minus 4z equals 10. Put in the -2. That gives me y plus 8 equals 10. Move your 8 over, I get y equals 2. Then you go to the top, and that is x plus y plus z equals 1. That's x plus y is 2. Z is a minus 2 equals 1. The 2's cancel. X equals 1. You can totally check it. Okay, question 10. Find the inverse. Okay, here's your equation B. Actually, I'm not going to write it down. Here's how you do it. You take your B. On the other side, you put the identity. Then you manipulate it so that the identity is on the other side and one ends up on the right is the inverse. Okay, so write down my B. Over here, write my identity. Turn the left into the identity, okay? So the first thing I need is a 1 right there, and I have it. So the next thing I need is a 0 right there, okay? Now, I could combine row 1 and row 2, add those together, or 2 and 3. So if I did 2 and 3, I would get my 0, but I would also, 2 and a -1 would give me a 1 right there. So I can see right now that row 2 plus row 3 becomes my new row 2 is the better option because I get a 2 for 1. If you don't choose that, if you do 1 and 2, it's fine. It's just more work. Okay, so add row 2 and row 3 together. -1 plus 1 is a 0. -2 minus 1 is a 1. 3 and 0 is a 3. 0 and 0 is a 0. 1 and 0 is a 1. 0 and 1 is a 1. The next thing I need is a 0 here. Okay, I could go row 1 minus row 2, or row 1 minus row 3, or row 3 minus row 1. I do not see a benefit from one to the other. I'm going to go row 3 minus row 2. Row 3 minus row 1, sorry, becomes my new row 3. Okay, so row 1 doesn't change. Row 2 doesn't change. Add row 1 and row 3 together, and I get row 3 minus row 1. 1 minus 1, 0. -1 minus 0, -1. 0 minus 2, -2. 0 minus 1, -1. 0 minus 0, 0. 1 minus 0, 1. The next thing I need is a 0 here. So I'm just going to add row 2 to row 3. I cannot use row 1 right here. So I'm going to go row 2 plus row 3 becomes my new row 3. So row 1 doesn't change. Row 2 doesn't change. add row 1, row 2 and row 3 together, and you get 0, 0, 1, -1, 1, and 2. I got a 2 for 1. I got that 0 to be what it was supposed to be, and I also got that 1. So the next thing I need is a 0 here. Remember, you cannot use row 1 because row 1 will mess up this 0 and that 1 that I just got. So I'm going to go -3 times row 3 plus row 2 becomes my new row 2. So row 1 doesn't change. Row 3 doesn't change. Distribute a -3 across the bottom. 0, 0, -3, 3, -3, -6. Write row 2 underneath it. Add those together and I get 0, 1, 0, 3, -2, -5. The last thing I need is a 0 here. Use the 1. So I'm going to go -2 times row 3 added to row 1 becomes my new row 1. So row 2 doesn't change. Row 3 doesn't change. Distribute a -2 across the bottom. 0, 0, -2, 2, -2, -4. Write row 1 underneath it. Add those together and you get 1, 0, 0, 3, -2, -4. Okay? Please don't highlight that and say you're done. You have to write it correctly. So you say my inverse is, and then you write down the right-hand side. Okay? Now, there is a way to check this. It's kind of long. It's not that long, but it's a little long. If this were my final, or even maybe on my quiz, and if my whole quiz was done and I still had more time, you could take B, the original B, and multiply it by the inverse, and you should get the identity. You could also take the inverse we just got, multiply it by B, and you should get the identity. If B and B inverse are really inverses of each other, then that will be true. Okay? So there is a way to check it. Okay, question number 11. I'm going to swing this way. This way, start here. Okay, here's number 11. So you have a system. This did appear on my final one time, and I about had a heart attack when I saw it, but it's not as bad as it looks. Okay, so if I added those together right now, nothing would cancel out. But if I distributed a -3 right here, remember when you multiply -3 or -3 over 1 times this thing, the top just gets multiplied together as does the bottom. So when you distribute that -3, you get -3 over x minus 6 over y is equal to -12. And then the x's go away. So then when you have 3 over y and a -6 over y, that gives you a -3 over y equals -12 and a +9 is a -3. Now if you just put a 1 underneath and cross multiply, -3y equals -3. So it ends up kind of sweet here, y is 1. Then I go into the original equation and I can put y equals 1 either here or here, and then I'm going to find my x. I choose the top one, okay? So I have 1 over x plus 2 over y, y is a 1, so that's just a 2, equals 4. Pull my 2 over, 1 over x equals 2. Some of you, I think, look at that and you cannot see cross multiply. I've got to get you to where you see cross multiply. As soon as I do that, then you're like, oh, cross multiply. Well, 2 is the same thing as 2 over 1, okay? So you have 2 over x equals 1, divided by 2, x equals 1/2, okay? So there's my answer, and once again, checkable, okay? Okay, question number 12. Find the determinant. Okay, so we've kind of done this because we did a big, huge Cramer's rule. There was a question on the final recently that just said find the determinant. It didn't have you actually go through and solve a system, okay? So write down your -2, get rid of the row, get rid of the column, 1, 6, 2, -1. Then write down your 0. You're supposed to change the sign, but there's no such thing as negative 0. Get rid of the row, get rid of the column, 3, 4, 2, negative 1. Third number's a 5. Don't change the sign. Get rid of the row, get rid of the column, 3, 4, 1, 6. Now do the cross multiply thing. So you have a negative 2. 1 times negative 1 is a negative 1 minus 6 times 2 is a 12 plus 0 times 3 times negative 1 is a negative 3 minus 4 times 2 is 8 plus 5. 6 times 3 is 18 minus 1 times 4 is 4. Grab your calculator. And you get 96. That's your answer. Okay? Question 13. Okay, so solve this by graphing. I do not think there will be a solve by graphing on your final. Okay? I'm going to do it. I'm going to make sure you know how to do it and you're ready. I just don't think you're going to have it. Okay? The first one is a line. It's a line because both the x is raised to the first, as is the y. The next one, the x is squared and the y is squared, so I know that this is a circle. Standard form for a line is y equals mx plus b. Standard form for a circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to the radius squared. So I have to get them both in standard form. The line is easy. Just pull the x over and I get y equals x minus 5. The circle is not so easy. Now, I have an x squared and I have an x to the first. So I know I'm going to have to complete the square on the x's. So I have x to the second minus 4x plus blank. I have a y to the second, but I have no y to the first. So I do not need to complete the square on the y's because there is no y to the first. On the right hand side I have a 5 and then I have to balance it with completing the square on the x's. Okay, so right here 4 divided by 2 is a 2, 2 to the second is a 4, and I have to balance it right there. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that and I'm going to factor it. It's so easy to factor it. The x to the second always goes to an x, that minus goes right there, square root of 4 is a 2, and the whole thing's squared. If I FOILed out x minus 2 times x minus 2, I would get x to the second minus 4x plus 4. Then you have plus y squared equals 9. So this is a circle that has a center right here. You get, change the sign, you get a 2. There's no number with the y, so that's a 0, and your radius is 3. Okay, so now we're going to graph it. Okay, so I'm going to go down 5, make a dot, and then I'm going to go up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1. Well, if I'm down here at 5 and I'm going 1 and 1, I know it's going to hit there at 5. So there's my line. Okay, now I'm going to go to the point 2, 0, which is right here. Then I'm going to go out 3 units in each direction, like that, draw it in, looks like that. There's an answer, there's an answer. So this answer right here is 5, 0. This one is positive 2, negative 3. Store them in, check them, done. Okay? All right, question 14. This is the vertical asymptote, horizontal asymptote business, okay? So the top is fine. The bottom factors 2, an x and an x, and a 4 and a 2, and the biggest is the negative, okay? So question A is domain. You look at the denominator, and the bottom can't be 0, so x cannot be equal to negative 2 or 4. Question B, to find the x-intercept, you let y be 0, which is the same as letting the top be a 0, so that gives you 5, 0. Question C, the y-intercept is found by letting x be a 0. You guys, if I look at the multiplied out version of this thing, looks like this, and I let x be a 0, anything that has a 0 in it goes away. So I'm left with a negative 5 over a negative 8, which is a positive 5/8. Question D, the vertical asymptote, that comes from the bottom. So I have x equals negative 2 that's odd, and x equals positive 4 that is also odd. Question E, non-vertical. If you look at the multiplied out version, at biggest over biggest is x over x squared. So that is going to be a horizontal asymptote, and it's going to be at y equals 0. Okay? Question 15 is super easy. The maximum number of turning points, you take the biggest exponent, which is an 8, and you subtract 1, so the answer is a 7. Okay? Number 16, I do think number 16 is going to be on your final. This is a critical numbers type 2. If you cross multiply, you're going to get no points for this problem. Okay? The only time you cross multiply is when there's an equal sign. I think the toughest part of this problem is remembering the steps. It's not necessarily doing the steps. So step 1 is to get a 0 on the right hand side. So it's x minus 5 over x plus 2 minus 4 is less than or equal to 0. Step number 2 is to get a common denominator, which is going to be x plus 2. The first guy already had the x plus 2. The second guy's missing the x plus 2. Distribute, and I get negative 4x minus 8. Do not forget your less than or equal to 0. Simplify the top, negative 3x minus 13 over x plus 2 is less than or equal to 0. The next step is to come up with your critical numbers. From the top, you get a negative 13 over 3. From the bottom, you get a negative 2. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to put negative 13 over 3 and a negative 2. Negative 13 over 3, just so you know, is a negative 4 1/3. The negative 2 is going to be an open circle because it comes from the bottom. It's a restriction. The negative 13 over thirds is closed because you have an equal sign. If this is negative 4 1/3, maybe test like a negative 5. And I'm going to put it here, adding parentheses around the top. Okay, so if you go negative 5, store, enter, parenthesis, negative 3, membar, enter, minus 13, close it, divided by parenthesis, membar, enter, plus 2, close it, enter, I get a negative. You guys, this is raised to the first and this is raised to the first. They have no even powers, so I know my signs are going to alternate. Negative, positive, negative. I'm looking for where it's less than 0. That would be negative, so it's here and here. They usually like you to answer in interval form, so the answer is negative infinity to negative 13/3 with a bracket, u, and then negative 2 to infinity. If you forget the u, they're going to have me take off a lot of points. Okay, number 17. A ball is thrown upward with a velocity of 42 feet per second at a height in feet after t seconds given by this equation. After how many seconds does the ball reach a maximum height? Write the answer in exact, do not approximate. Okay, so this is just maximum. Okay, so this is going to be a parabola that opens down. X stands for time in seconds, so that's what they want. They just want the x coordinate of the vertex. Well, to find the x coordinate of the vertex is just negative b over 2a. So that is negative 42 over 2 times negative 16. I know that's going to be a positive. 42 divided by 32 gives me a decimal. Now, it says don't approximate, okay? Technically, what I just got, 1.3125, is not an approximation. Yes, it's a decimal, but it's not an approximation because I didn't round. That's exactly how it came out. You could also do this, 42 over 32, that's 21 over 16. Make sure you label it, okay? And that would be seconds and seconds, like that, okay? Question 18. 2 logs and a number that's not a 0, condense and convert. So it's log base 2 of x minus 1 times x equals 1. The way I wrote that's kind of awkward. It's typical to put the x in the front. Now I convert. So 2 to the first equals x times x minus 1. Distribute x to the second minus x. Pull the 2 over. Minus 2 equals 0. Then I factor x and x. 2 goes to a 2 and a 1. Signs are different. Biggest is the negative. X equals negative 1 and positive 2. okay? I'm not done because it was given in log form. So I'm checking x equals -1. A couple of things people do. They do a really lazy check. They don't really show it. Another thing that people do is they put it into that step, which is not the original. So both of those will not give you credit for that check. So when you check this, you have to go log base 2 of -1 minus 1 plus log base 2 of -1 equals 1. And I can tell right now that that is an invalid solution because I'm taking the log of a negative. Next one, x equals 2. So that's log base 2 of 2 minus 1 plus log base 2 of 2 is equal to 1. If you don't know how to put that in your calculator, that's a problem. Okay, so we've got to make sure you know how to do that. Grab your calculator and you're going to go log 2 minus 1, close it, divided by log 2, close it, plus log 2, close it, divided by log 2, close it, enter, 1 equals 1. So I'm done. I have one answer. The only thing I box or highlight is x equals 2. Okay? Number 18. Pardon me, number 19. Okay, so this is recursive sequence. So you know the first term is a 4, and then c sub n is -2 times c to the n minus 1 plus 1, and they want c sub 4. So look, c sub 2, c sub 3, c sub 4. What you have to know is this notation, all that means is the previous term. So to find the second term, you go -2 times the previous term, which is a 4, plus 1, that gives you -7. Do the next one. -2 times the previous term, which is a -7, plus 1, that gives you 15. Next one. -2 times the previous term, which is 15, plus 1, that gives you -29. That's your answer. Okay? Number 20. Solve this system of equations algebraically. It says no points will be given by trial and error. That's Weber State's way of saying she'll work on this question. Okay? I did have a question almost exactly like this last semester. It's pretty ugly. Okay? So you're going to want to watch. This was on the final last semester. The x's will not cancel because one is squared and one is not. Same thing with the y. So I'm forced to use substitution. I do not want to solve equation 2 for either x or y because that's going to involve a plus or minus and a square root, which is horrible. So I'm going to take equation 1 and I'm going to solve it for x or y. It does not matter which one you do. So if I solve it for x, 3y equals 3x equals 1 minus 2y. To solve for x, divide by 3. So now I know that x is 1 minus 2y over 3. Now I'm going to go into equation 2 and I'm going to put that there. So it's 9 times 1 minus 2y over 3, whole thing squared, plus 4y squared equals 13. Okay? Put your 9 down. If this is squared, then they're both individually squared. So the 1 minus 2y is squared on the top, and the 3 is squared on the bottom. Well, 3 squared is just 9. Inside, I would have 1 minus 2y squared, which is 1 minus 2y times 1 minus 2y. So all I did is just square both of those. Then I still have my plus 4y squared equals 13. Now on the inside, I'm going to FOIL those. So I have a 9, and then I have 1 minus 4y plus 4y squared all over 9. 1 minus 2y times 1 minus 2y is 1 minus 4y plus 4y squared. Then I have plus 4y squared equals 13. Well, it looks terrible, but it actually ends up okay because look what happens, those 9's cancel. So then you have 1 minus 4y plus 4y squared plus 4y squared is equal to 13. I know I'm going to have to factor because I've got those squares. So now I have 8y squared minus 4y. The 13 comes over and becomes a negative, minus 12 equals 0. So the next thing I would do is take out a 4. When I take out a 4, I'm left with 2y squared minus y minus 3. And then I'm going to factor that. So 2y squared goes to 2y in plain y. The 3 is going to go to a 3 and a 1. 3 goes there, 1 goes there. That gives me 3y and 2y, which subtract to give me a 1y. The biggest is the negative, so the negative goes right there. Either this or this or this is 0. 4 is obviously not 0. Set that guy equal to 0, I get 3 over 2. Set that guy equal to 0, I get a negative 1. So I'm going to have two answers. One is 3/2 for y, the other one is negative 1. Now, I solved this using substitution, and remember when you solve using substitution, it's way easier to find the second number. So I'm going to put a 3/2 in for y. So I have x equals 1 minus 2 times 3/2 divided by 3. Okay? If you want to do the top on your calculator, you totally can. So look, if you just go 1 minus 2 parenthesis, 3 divide 2, close it, enter, I get a negative 2. So that's a negative 2 over 3, and that goes right there. Next one is going to be x equals 1 minus 2 times negative 1 over 3. Negative 2 times a negative 1 is a positive 2. 1 plus 2 is a 3, so that's 3 over 3, which is a 1. There are your two answers. Store them in and check them. Okay? Number 21. Find the sum. Okay, so you have 15, 9, 3, negative 3, and then you have negative 99 clear down here. Okay? So the only sequence you've learned so far is arithmetic. 15 subtract 6 is 9. 9 subtract 6 is 3. 3 subtract 6 is a negative 3. So I know that this is arithmetic, and I know my difference is negative 6. The formula for the sum of an arithmetic sequence is S sub n is n divided by 2 times a plus a sub n. You guys, the problem is I don't know how many terms I have. So look, this is my first term, this is my second term, this is my third term, this is my fourth term, and then it keeps going, and I have no idea how many terms I have. So I have to put a number in for n right here, but I don't know what n is right now. So I'm just going to have to leave it blank for a second, okay? So the sum of the first, I don't know how many terms, is I don't know how many terms divided by 2. Then this a or a sub 1 is the first term. A sub n is the last term. Okay, so now I need to find n, and then I'll have my answer. If you're ever using a formula and you're missing something, then you go back to the other formula. So the other formula is a sub n equals a plus d times n minus 1. So a sub n is the last term, negative 99. A is the first term, that's 15. Difference is negative 6. N we don't know, n minus 1. But now I can solve that for n. So I have negative 99 equals 15 minus 6n plus 6. That gives me negative 6n plus 21 equals negative 99. Pull my 21 over, and I get negative 6n equals negative 120. Divide by negative 6, and I know that's the 20th term. You have to figure out it's the 20th term by using that. You can't write out all the terms and add them up. They're not gonna let you do that. Okay? So now I'm finding S sub 20, and it's 20 over 10, or pardon me, 20 over 2. 20 over 2 is a 10, parenthesis 15 minus 99, close it off, and I get negative 840. Okay? All right, last question. Woo! Sorry I'm going so fast. I have 1,000 things to do. Plus you can pause and fast forward. Okay, I know that the fifth, this right here means the fifth term is 12. This means the 20th term is 87, okay? In the problem, well, you do know that it's arithmetic because they're giving you a D. If it was geometric, which I know we have not learned yet, then it would be an R, okay? So anyway, the formula for a specific term is a sub n equals a plus d times n minus 1, okay? So a sub n is the term, which is 12, is the first term, which we don't know, plus the common difference, which we don't know. But if it's the fifth term, that means n is 5. So 5 minus 1 is 4. do the same thing over here. The term 87 is the first term, which we don't know, plus the common difference, which we don't know. If this is the 20th term, then n is 20. So this would be 20 minus 1, which is 19. And now look what I have, guys. I have a plus 4d equals 12, and I have a plus 19d equals 87. I just have a system of equations that I need to solve. So if I changed all the signs, like negative a minus 4d equals negative 12, and combined those, then I would get 15d equals, looks like 75. Yep, 75. And then if I divide it by 15, now I know the common difference is 5. Okay? Now, the other thing they want to know is, what's the 32nd term? Like I said before, you cannot just list them out and count. They're not going to give you credit for that. So to find a specific term for arithmetic, there's your formula. So it doesn't matter if it's an A or C, it's the same thing. So the 32nd term is the first term, which I don't know, plus the common difference, which is a 5. 32 minus 1 is 31. How do I find my first term? Well, if I had finished solving that system, I would have been able to find A, which is my first term. So I know that D is 5, so I'm going to come right there, and I'm going to put a 5 in for D. So I have A plus 4 times 5 is 20 is equal to 12. Move your 20 over. A equals negative 8. There it is. So it's negative 8 plus 5, parenthesis, 31, close it off, and you get 147. Okay? And that is it. Okay? So study hard for this quiz. Remember that it's just a quiz. So don't blow off studying for it because it's just a quiz, because it's helping you to prepare for the final. Okay? So study hard and work hard, but don't freak out. Just do your very best, okay? And I'm here to help you.